Hey, everybody, welcome to Text Request Talks, where we have conversations with business leaders about how they make things happen. Presented by Text Request, the business text messaging platform that lets you text from your office phone numbers directly on your computer or any other device so you can stop making phone calls and start actually getting responses. Learn more at textrequest.com. I'm Kenneth Burke, and today we're talking with Kelli Schroeder, who's the VP of Franchise Development for WellBiz Brands. Kelli, glad to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, Kenneth. Excited to chat with you today.
Hopefully, this first question is a pretty easy one.
All
What do you
right.
do for WellBiz, and what does WellBiz do?
Yeah, so I oversee the franchise development for WellBiz Brands. We are the leader in wellness and beauty franchise concepts. We've got 5 brands in our portfolio, and I oversee the team that sells new development, the resales department, so secondary assets, and then also the franchise development marketing for the organization. So my team sells all brands across all countries. And yeah, I've been there for about a year and a half.
So, how many brands is that, and how many countries are you in?
So we've got close to 900 locations across the United States. We've got one location in Canada, and we are launching Dry Bar in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, Kuwait, UAE, this year and early next year. So we're having a pretty big focus on growing our footprint domestically. We think that the white space is like 4x for what we are right now. However, we're really going to be putting on the gas end of next year to push international because there's so much growth for beauty and wellness services and concepts around the world. So we're just getting started.
That's exciting. Is there a particular type of person who's a good fit for any of your brands, or are there some unique differences between who makes a good franchise owner?
Yeah, great question. So with our businesses, so we've got Dry Bar, which is blowouts just for women, Elements Massage, massage therapy, Radiant Waxing, Fitness Together, which is a personal training concept, and then Amazing Lash Studio, eyelash extensions. So it's all of a one-to-one service model, and the business model runs on membership. So you've got that recurring revenue. So when we look at the potential franchise owner, they could be the owner operator, or they are the more sophisticated investor that's well capitalized, has a great business acumen, has either run a business in the past, or just is really literate with running a business and looking at financials. And we want to see that they have a passion and that they care about the cause and the brand. And so, we have actually been shifting more towards a more sophisticated investor. And effective January of next year, we're only going to be selling 3 units or more to grow our portfolio because we want to find franchisees that want to scale and grow the brand with us and that are sustainable for the long term. So, what I've been seeing a lot is folks that maybe are in food, right? Food franchising, and they want to diversify, right? Because they're looking at QSR and what are the trends there. It's a very competitive space and they want to diversify their assets. So something like fitness or wellness or beauty is a great plug into that. And so we've actually signed some pretty key players that are some of the largest food operators in the United States, and they've joined our portfolio to want to grow some of our brands.
That's interesting. Tell me more about the the decision to go after or to only work with people who want to open 3 or more locations. You're not the first person I've heard or first brand I've heard to put um, a multi-unit focus in play, but I am curious for the reasoning behind it. Why go after that versus somebody who maybe is perfectly capable but is um, could be less experienced or is just not sure what the big picture would hold long term.
Absolutely. So I think it depends on where the brand is in their life cycle, right? So when we started out, a lot of our brands are 20, coming on 20 years old. 2 of our brands actually established the category in franchising, so blowouts and eyelash extensions, and we're the leader in those as well. So, starting out, that's not what we were going after, but as we have become more sophisticated and mature as a company and as a brand, we would rather grow strategically through fewer franchisees that have the capital to grow with us over the long term to protect enterprise value and the sustainability of their business ownership and really being bought into our business. Um, That doesn't mean that one unit operators are not capable, but it's just been part of our strategy. Also, when you think about from a franchisee support standpoint, right now we've got 900 locations and, over 400 franchisees to support efficiently and effectively versus doing consolidation and moving towards fewer franchisees that have a larger portfolio. I think that we'll see a more positive impact in our ability to support and grow alongside our franchisees that are growing their portfolio. There's many other reasons for it, but those are just kind of a couple off the top.
So the franchisee support, that's more of a just a numbers game, right? Supporting, let's say 400 versus 900 or up to 1,000. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right. And just the ability to be smart with our resources, where we want to grow, how we want to grow it, and who we want to grow with.
How how do you determine targets for how many new locations you want to open?
Good question. It's always like, what's the silver bullet? Who has the
Yeah.
answer? And as you know, it's a bit of art and science. So market planning is very detailed, very robust. You're going to want to obviously leverage a GIS technology. There's a lot of vendors out there to really help you map out and see what are the key success factors of a site. And how do we build out a market and fortify it where we're not cannibalizing the business, but we are really giving franchisees the opportunity to grow into that trade area and to sustain their business for 10, 20 plus years, right? So it's looking at the numbers, it's looking at income levels, what percentage in our case, are female versus male in a population. What is the density of the population and what's the future growth of that place. We're seeing a ton of growth in Florida and Texas, and a lot of people moving away from where I live in New York and California more to the South and Southeast United States. And so what is that migration? How does that impact growth plans for brands like ours that are in wellness and beauty, which is a growing category? And so we want to look at, having a sound market plan, and that's leveraging technology and looking at a lot of holistic data to really arrive at that figure of saying, hey, we think that this market can hold 15 over X time frame, and the future growth over 10 years could be Y. Of course, those things change, but we try to project out at least 5 years.
I'm really curious for this one. This might be a little in the weeds, but uh, all of your brands are the service industry or our service brands, and it's all in person.
Mhm.
Uh, then I'm in tech and software, and that's almost entirely virtual or digital. And so I'm curious to hear from your perspective, how has kind of the shift to remote work and hybrid situations, this growth of AI and other technologies, it's a big question, but how has that affected your work, or has it really?
I think it's augmented. I don't think it's replaced bodies, and I don't think it's replaced the sales process or the customer service guest interaction when you're going to get a service. But it is a vehicle that allows us to work smarter, not harder in most cases, and really leveraging that technology to put the customer at the center and thinking about what are their needs, how do they want to access your brand, how can you use technology so that you're removing barriers and making it easier on them to book that appointment or to reorder that service or that product. And also leveraging AI to really dig into like who your core customer is. What are your avatars that you're selling to, and how do those change over time, and how do those avatars want to be spoken to when they get an email campaign or they get a text request from you? Every buyer is not the same, and to be able to leverage these language platforms and to train them based on your brand and the type of customer that you want to target, it's really, really, really powerful tool for business development.
Yeah, I really like that view of using it to augment, to make you smarter, to help, as opposed to replacing.
Mhm.
Something I see some brands go, and I don't love this, but is using technology to replace human interactions. And I really find, and we have found as a business, that uh, technology is most effective when you can use it to automate and replace kind of the non human interaction touch points so that you can spend more time with your customers. You can spend more time engaging with employees. And that's where so much of the value comes from.
Bingo. You summarized it up there and said it way shorter time than I did. Automation is king. And when we automate, we harness the ability to scale because we're able to free up the human capital time to focus on the touch points with the customer while the AI and the technology is working in the background through automation. So it's really powerful.
You mentioned scale there, and earlier you were talking about wanting to work with investors who are going to be multi-unit owners. Uh, are there things that you have been, how do I phrase this? Are there operations or processes or what have you that you've been trying to replace over the last year or so, so that you can scale more? I guess, have you found things that you kind of have to break in order to grow bigger?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, since we are in the service industry, right, we're rendering a one-to-one service. We've got to make sure that we stay on top of our labor utilization. So how are we using our stylists or our massage therapists, and making sure that they're happy and that they're busy and they have clients, and that we're also automating our marketing at the local shop level to be top of mind with customers, to convert them to membership, and so that we do have that recurring customer that comes through the door. And technology, being able to have automations at those different touch points with the employee or team member experience, and also the guest and customer experience is really important. Um, Also looking at different labor models, like within the four walls of the studio itself. So do you have a hybrid option of, allowing guests to check themselves in at a kiosk, or is there someone sitting there, part-time running the desk, or is there someone there full-time? And how can you get creative with adjusting the level of service, both with the human touch and the technology, to strike the right balance that is a winning business proposition and where you can see a good, healthy, financial return and business model. And that's a lot more easier said than done. So I've been seeing a lot of work in our brands on, like, not only do we do renovation, but how can we leverage innovation to help around those topics?
Shifting gears entirely.
Yes, let's
You've
do it.
moved up in your, yeah, you've moved up in your career from an individual contributor to a manager to now you're an executive working with multiple brands under the umbrella of WellBiz. It, how have you had to change and grow along the way to shift into those new roles? Have there been any particular skills that have stood out or traits that you've had to learn?
That's a good question. Um, One that I don't think I can fully answer here today, but I will tell you, um, coming in with a mindset of curiosity and asking a lot of questions. Like, I'm a big believer. I love the book, The First 90 Days. It's kind of just this core leadership principle where when you come into a new organization, you're going to want to spend the first 90 days really, like, winning people over, winning their trust, learning from what people do at the organization, what is the institutional knowledge, and to really pause and sit back and try to listen before you go in like a bull in a china shop and try to fix everything on, like, in the first month, because that is, like, the biggest way to crush morale and lose your team. And you may, have, like, the best decisions and direction, and they may be the way that the company needs to go moving forward. But I think style, and basic leadership principles can, like, make or break you in that moment. Um, and then I also think too, there's going to be times in business and in organizations where the company, whether you're owned by private equity, you're publicly traded, or you're privately held, there's going to come time in the growth trajectory where your skill set, like, you've either outgrown that role and the company does not have the infrastructure, or the budget to promote you because it's just not there yet, and you realize sometimes you have to leave to find another opportunity. And then there's going to be other times where you are just loving along for the ride at a certain company or brand, but big changes come and they happen from the top. And it may become a place that you no longer want to work at. And that's okay too. So I think like it's just shifting this mindset. I feel like from our parents, when they were growing up, they're like, get a job, get a pension, stay there for 50 years, and then retire in the Maldives, or in Florida and be a snowbird. And we know pensions aren't, are of the past. Unfortunately, we don't have access to that. And the economy is really different. And um, when we talk about loyalty to companies, I think that means something very different today than it did back then. And it's not that you can't not be loyal to companies, but I think it's just having an open mind and just knowing sometimes that um, your skill set can be valuable, but there's also times where companies pivot and you may need to pick up your ball and go play somewhere else, and that's okay.
Has there been a guiding light for you, or something you particularly look out for when making those decisions?
Um, I think I go back to like, how is this sitting in my stomach, and like how is this sitting with my personal values, and like how is this sitting with the ethics that I know to be true of like how I want to show up as a person and as a leader and as a mom and as a wife and way outside of work. And I want to sit with it and I want to see how it's making me feel. And every day is not going to be roses and butterflies. Like there's going to be hard days, and that comes with any job, and especially in leadership. Like you leadership is about what you do when things go wrong and you're in a rock and a hard place. It's not about on the days where you have all the wins. It's how you show up when things really fall apart. And so I think it's just making sure that, you're in an environment where you feel like you can thrive, where you're respected, where you have a voice, and where you can feel like you're still able to learn. And if you ever get to a place where, you don't feel that those things are true, ask for feedback, be open, be coachable. But if you truly at the end of the day like don't align with the feedback or with the direction, then that's okay. And you've just gotta like not force a square peg into a round hole, and move on to something that could be a better fit that's more aligned with your values, more aligned with your passions that you love. I just think, we spend 70% of our lives working, Kenneth, and it is just way too short to be doing something that you don't love, or that you're not really passionate about, and that you get a lot of edification from. And so that's really driven me a lot. And I've just had amazing mentors and folks that really just took a chance on me. So
Something I like to ask everybody, and kind of teeing it up for me here, is where do you go to learn? To keep improving and going forward. And before I let you answer, I want to point out your educational background to me is very interesting. Um,
thanks.
in a good way, yeah. Double major, then an international MBA, then a few years later got a certificate in franchise management, and then went through the CFE course that IFA offers. And so that's a lot of education packed in. And I'm just curious what your mindset is around that. What's your motivation to pursue that? And then how does education or ongoing learning kind of fit into your career development?
Yeah, well, thank you. And I am a huge nerd, even though I'm like the salesperson and likes to, sell you a good thing and get you all re-wrought up and excited. Like I'm a student, and it really motivates me. Like I want to continue to always learn and grow. Like if you don't innovate, you die. Like if you aren't pushing yourself to learn, like AI is a great example. Like yes, I have all this education, but like I've got to keep up with the times. And those, especially in franchise business development and sales, like if they're not taking an extremely hard look at how they can incorporate AI in the direct and indirect nuances and infrastructure of their franchise sales lifecycle, they will be extinct. They will die. And so I think I've tried to harness that mentality with education. It kind of like motivates me to like kind of from a place of fear, but also equally curiosity. So I always want to be learning. And a big part right now of where I try to learn. I try to go, there's a couple things that like I get a lot out of every year in the franchising space. One is the Franchise Leadership and Development Conference. Whoa, like the amount of brain power and what is shared over those few days is like the most impactful. And I bring back nuggets to say, like, okay, when I'm doing strategic planning for the next year and the next 5 years, I always go back to my notes or an action item from that conference. Another thing is I try to be really like engaged on LinkedIn with thought leaders in the space to share ideas, to educate on the spirit of the model, what people are seeing, and really not like hard selling the brands that I work for, but more so to speak about the beautiful space of franchising and what an economic powerhouse it is for not only in our country but for the world, and how innovative the model is. And so having that community with peers online on LinkedIn to share ideas is huge. And then I'm a huge podcast gal. So like I have 10 to 12 podcasts that I listen to. I read a stat the other day that said 82% of all Americans listen to a podcast for at least 90 minutes or 90 minutes or less, like a day. And so thinking about that and like how to, knowledge is power, whether it's, from the news, there's a couple of franchise podcasts that I listen to on lead generation specifically. I love Jack Monson and him giving kind of the 10-minute overview of what's moving and shaking in franchising. And then, so I'm a big podcast fan. So anyone listening to this, feel free to reach out if you want my list. And I'd love to hear anyone listening what you guys listen to. Because again, I'm always in learning mode. And I think to top it off is education is the only thing that can never be taken away from you. And that, yeah, it's powerful.
That is powerful. That's a great piece of advice to end on as well. So, Kelli, thank you so much for this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Great to chat with you.